Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and our guest today again, for the second time, is Pat Brannigan. Pat, you have such a rich and glorious history, even though you've been here only 50 years instead of your entire 70-some-odd years of life, that we had to have you back for 3 or 4 reasons. First of all, we didn't finish your personal life. You had a nice list of all of the things that you've done, and even though they're written down and you were speaking as fast as you could, you still didn't get them all through, and we need to hit those for a little bit. We did get to your family, but you didn't tell us enough about your wife, Joan, who has also been the strength of news writing here in Wadsworth for the past, what, 50 years, too?
Not quite.
Not
Almost.
quite 50 years, but a long time. She's still doing it and doing a very, very fine job. But strangely enough, the calls we received after your program included and asked us to talk about these things. They are called bricks. You know something about bricks, don't you?
I hope.
A little bit about bricks. Since you were the vice president of the General Clay Products, which we used to call the Wadsworth Brickyard and then the Wadsworth Brick and Tile, but now it's General Clay Products, and I know how to say that, because if I don't know how to say it, I have this right here in front of me so that I can remind myself of it. See, when you're used to calling it the Brickyard, you have a difficult time making that determination. Let's go then to where we left off somewhere, and we might have to pick up on some of the things and repeat a couple, but one of the biggest aspects of your most recent life right now, we weren't able to touch upon at all, and that is your fundraising abilities. Right now you're working with the Dr. Masrick golf outing, and tell us about that. I think that's so interesting, and why we're doing it and for what reason. And who is Dr. Masrick?
Well, Dr. Joseph Masrick was an ophthalmologist and an MD.
He died in about a year ago.
2 years ago.
2 years ago now. In August, as a matter of fact.
Right, exactly.
He was buried on August 15th, 95?
2 years ago.
1995.
Right. And I was pleased to give the eulogy for that ceremony.
That was a beautiful one, too. I remember that. I played for that funeral.
Yes, I remember. Joe was a remarkable man, had a photographic memory.
Brilliant.
Practiced medicine with that kind of dramatic background that anything he read about medicine he kept and was able to reach in and get it. Joe's many friends in the medical field and then soon to become many friends at the Cleveland Clinic when they discovered he had myeloma, all felt that his willingness to endure some of the new kinds of medicines in an attempt to offset the ongoing dilemma with myeloma was such an impact for them that they felt that he would be an ideal person around which to build some fundraising. So 2 weeks ago, they held a golf outing up at Aurora Country Club.
That would have been on what date?
That was July 11th. August 11th.
August 11th, okay. August 11th. This was held where?
At Aurora Country Club.
Aurora Country Club, August 11th.
Yeah.
And we called it the what?
Well, it was the myeloma fundraiser.
The myeloma fundraiser. Was
cancer.
Dr. Masrick's name associated with it?
Oh,
then,
yes.
too?
He was the lead candidate for
Lead
the
candidate.
honoree. And it was programmed by the Cleveland Clinic in an effort to raise research funds.
Now, Dr. Joseph Masrick lives in Wadsworth, or lived in Wadsworth.
Yeah.
He's gone now, rest his soul, but he lived in Wadsworth. His wife still lives in Wadsworth,
Catherine still lives here.
And they live on Whitestone Circle, do they
Right,
not?
exactly. What a memory.
But before that, they lived in one of the most, the most ornate houses in Wadsworth, one of them. We heard 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them, but this was one of the most. Tell us about that house, too, and why, when they lived there, and tell us about that.
Well, that was Bill Kane's estate.
Built in 1938?
Something like that, yeah. Bob Sondels worked on that.
Bob Sondels worked on that. He was a bricklayer.
And that was an enormous dedication
At that
for a
time.
brick. That home was built with all kinds of ornate gingerbread treatment.
Now, I thought you might be able to get the word brick in there somewhere. Tell us about those bricks in that house.
Well, of course, it preceded my time with the plant, but that was such a phenomenal home in many ways. It had a bowling alley in the basement, a shooting range, an elevator, and of course all surrounded by beautiful brick. When Bill Kane sold it,
Who was Bill Kane?
Bill Kane was the president of the First National Bank of Wadsworth.
Okay.
And earlier was an attorney. Earlier than that, I think, was associated with the Iowa Injector Company.
That's right.
Through a family. Bill wanted to move to California to be around his children in Carmel, and sold it to Dr. Masrick. And Dr. Masrick had that home for probably 15 or 20 years.
Right. That house had one of the first garage door openers in Wadsworth, but it was done with a huge magnet in the driveway. You drive over the magnet and you press a button, and then that would interrupt the latch, and the springs, I think, were a motor. I think that was what I was told. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what I was told.
I would imagine.
And then Jerry Hall had one of the first garage door openers that actually is a modern day garage door opener. That's what I was told as well. And we're going to get those kinds of data
Sure.
Identified later by people who are from those families. But this is extremely interesting to have this little vignette about Dr. Joseph Masrick living in the Bill Kane house. And you were heavily involved, were you not, with the fundraising aspect. Tell us, without humility here, tell us exactly how you were contacted, who contacted you, and how you became involved.
Well, I was sought
involved
by the Cleveland Clinic to help, and Dr. Hussein, who was Dr. Masrick's physician at that time, felt it was a very worthy cause. And
they went through the telephone directory and found Pat Brannigan?
No,
no.
There were some references. I think
references.
Catherine Masrick probably made some reference. And
well, what about your extraordinary ability to raise money for various places in Medina County? Do you think that could have had anything to do with it?
I'm not sure. But it's been a facility that I've been able to enact and help, and particularly with worthy causes such as the Masrick fundraiser. Been involved with the leadership of Medina County, the Republican Party, the church.
And which church is that?
Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart in Wadsworth. Of course, I know that, but I want to make sure that when this is viewed 50 years from now, that we'll know that you went to Sacred Heart Church in Wadsworth.
Yep.
The Republican Party will probably still be extant, so we won't have to identify that.
Yes. I think as far back as 1951 or 2, when Sacred Heart School was built, because it was a brick, I suppose then Father Korab felt that somebody gaining some benefit from the purchase of brick ought to be able to raise some money. So I helped on that issue, and then later on church additions, and it's been about over 35 years, I guess, 3 or 4 fundraising activities.
What are some of the fundraising activities in which you've been associated? I heard you say that you helped raise funds for Sacred Heart School, 1950-ish, and then after that, what were some of the big ones?
Well, we had 3 additions to the church.
Okay, and you helped on those?
Yes.
As a matter of fact, you chaired a couple of them, didn't you?
Yes. Yep. I guess the most recent one that's been very profound for me has been Leadership Medina County.
Tell us about Leadership Medina County and what's that all about?
1989, and Linda Carino was instrumental in my being involved.
She my wife was instrumental. Of course, you're one of her favorites.
She thought I could help them in some way, and I have been active until about a month ago.
And what did you do with Leadership Medina County in fundraising?
Well, an annual golf outing meant to raise funds to sustain that organization, held at the various country clubs around the area with an invitation to every golfer who could participate.
And what's your specialty in that golf outing? What kinds of things
well,
do you
I particularly sought out funds for sponsorship on the tees or the greens.
Sponsorship for tees of the green, which is very difficult because those guys aren't playing, right? They
well,
just have
some
to
do
money.
And some don't. Most of them do not play.
What kind of money did you think you raised for Leadership Medina County?
Oh, in the 7 years, $25,000 to $30,000.
And that's a big percentage of what they have as a budget.
It helps.
Surely does.
They'll do it again and again.
And you'll keep on doing it.
Well, I would like to go on and do some other things.
Well, we would like to have you do those too, but so long as we need money, we're going to have you there. Going back then to the Dr. Joseph Masrick golf outing in Aurora Country Club for the Myeloma Foundation, how many people were there?
They had over 144 golfers, and I think the count for dinner was 150.
Do you have any, would it be appropriate for you to tell us how much you raised?
Actually, we haven't seen a net figure yet. The target was $85,000.
$85,000. Did you have any help, or did that all come from
Oh,
you?
sure. Oh, yes. Many, many people helped.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Now, from what we have heard by the grapevine, that they all helped when it came time to be applauded, but the guy that did the work was Pat Brannigan.
Not necessarily so. No, I think this was a genuine effort. It heavily involved those who had had some connection with the loss through cancer.
Right.
There were some families there who had very significant relevance for being there, according to the
Now,
dilemma.
here in 1997, we still don't have a cure for myeloma.
No.
By the time that Wadsworth History is written for its 200th anniversary in 2014, maybe there will be, and we hope there will be, but right now there isn't. But what you did was to try to raise money for research
Yes.
for myeloma, is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
So that we aren't just raising money
Oh, no.
willy-nilly,
No,
we're doing it for research for myeloma. And
a strict, definite purpose.
that was the only reason you did it. Now, as I indicated, you didn't quite finish the story about your family. We went through your children, and they're just absolutely outstanding. And you have a daughter who's married to an astronaut, and his name is Steve Smith. And he, as we speak, either is on the Challenger or just got off the Challenger. Is that correct?
No, no.
Would
Challenger was lost.
The which?
Challenger.
Oh, what was the name of it?
He was on the Discovery.
Discover, I'm
Yes.
sorry, yes, the Discover, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yes.
That's the picture.
This was a flight in February,
Right.
and Steve made,
Put your finger up where Steve's.
right here in this corner.
There's Steve.
There's Steve.
That's son-in-law Steve.
Yes.
Steve Smith.
And
On the Discover. I'm sorry, the Challenger was the one that was lost
Right.
in
Yeah.
January. Yeah.
yeah, this is on the Discovery, which just returned from a most recent mission yesterday.
Yesterday. I
After
knew it was
11 days.
it was imminent, you know.
Yes. And his mission, of course, was spacewalk activity. He had first, third, and fifth day spacewalks.
And he's out there, 315 miles above the Earth, walking in thin air. I can't even talk about it. It's frightening.
Well, you're weightless, of course. The worry is
that would be nice. I've always wanted to be a little bit lighter.
the worry is that you might somehow become untethered, and then you drift off for
Forever.
unknown periods of time until they captured you somehow, if they could.
Oh, my heavens.
But he's thoroughly delighted with his position. Currently, at the moment, on the interim time until the next launch for him, he's in charge of all spacewalking activity and is training those for the next launch in next month.
How old is he?
37.
37 years old, and he is an exploring pioneer in space. And here we think that all these young kids don't do anything except raise cane and drink beer and things like that.
He doesn't drink a thing.
Not a thing.
It's been a lifelong ambition for him ever since third grade to be in space.
And he had his teacher tell us, did he not, that he used to write about that when he was in the third grade. Tell us about Joan Brannigan. Joan Brannigan has worked with news writing all of her life. As a matter of fact, she was graduated from Bowling Green State University in journalism. And I think that story is such a precious one, and certainly has a nice ring to it, particularly romantically, about how she got to Wadsworth.
Well, I had come in early 48, and mid 48, after being apart for a period of time, we decided to get married. And that occurred.
You were going with her at the time?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And July 17, 1948, we were married, and we moved to Wadsworth. Shortly after her arrival, John Miller, who was a good friend of the journalism professor at Bowling Green, learned that Joan was in town.
Now, John Miller himself, I believe, went to Worcester College, did he not? John didn't go to Bowling Green. Now, how did he know the professor at Bowling Green?
Well, they were on various committees together for journalism, and Professor Taylor suggested that he might be interested in Joan for
And he called
part of the staff. Called her, and
she was here only a half day or so, was that it?
just a few hours, I think.
A few hours, and he called her and offered her a job.
Yep.
And that began an almost 50-year career in journalism in Wadsworth.
Now, that was interrupted during childbearing time.
Well, of course.
Yeah. And she
But it
did
was-
some stringer work, some odd end stories.
But she was a part-timer anyway, though, wasn't she? Or was
Yes.
she over full-time?
She was full-time for a great number of years early,
Was she?
and then part-time, and then select number of hours currently.
Now, Joan has had some really interesting interviews. Tell us about two of them.
Well, I think one of the most prominent ones was Pierre Salinger about 5 years ago. She met him over at E.J. Thomas, discussed many things. Of course, if you remember, Pierre was Secretary of Chief of Staff
Chief of
for
Staff, right,
Kennedy,
for the Kennedy.
and a very good friend of his.
Wasn't he? I thought he was a brother-in-law.
I don't think so.
I could be wrong.
No. And then
Everyone
after
else is
the
a brother-in-law.
distress of Kennedy's death, he moved to Paris, where he's been an international writer of sorts, and came back to talk about various international affairs here. And Joan had an opportunity to talk with him for about 45 minutes. One of the other outstanding interviews she did, and she's so modest about it that she can't find the current the copy that related to that incident. She interviewed Mother Teresa.
I think that's
Down
just
at Canton.
outstanding.
It was phenomenal. The relevance of it and her lifetime dedication to helping the poor. And just hard to bring out words from her appropriate for her performance. But Joan did it.
Joan could. Joan could. Did she
Gerald Ford also was another interesting interview.
She interviewed Gerald Ford, so she interviewed a president, someone from the Kennedy administration, and a world-renowned person for the poor, Mother Teresa.
John went up to Medina one day about 3 years ago and met Martha Stewart at a time when she was then the feature speaker for Kmart, and also at the time when she was signing her book there. Found that interesting, that interview very interesting.
For the sake of posterity here, tell us why Martha Stewart is important today.
Well, she probably represents an ongoing way of doing things in a natural way, whether it be gardening or cooking or painting or what have you. And she's gathered a good deal of following. And when that following is created, then people want to know more about her.
That's right. And Joan was right there to help her. How about the personal Joan? A warm, sensitive, loving person. I've never seen her any way other than that. Can you tell us a little bit about Joan, the human being?
Well, I've known her a long time.
Yes, at least 55
and I'm still learning
years.
things about her.
Still learning things about her.
Very cool and calm under any sort of a condition. She's never been angry. She's usually very serene and very sedate about decisions, and a lot of good forethought about how to make an approach to an issue.
She probably has been angry, but maybe she hasn't shown her anger. She controls her anger.
I'm sure I've irritated her at times about
Well,
things, and she's been justified, but she's never...
We men do have a little bit of a facility for that. I do in my own family, I'm sure, and my wife doesn't show anger either, but I'm sure she does get angry. She just doesn't show it. I think that's great. Now, if we can step off, Joan, just for a couple of minutes here and go to these bricks.
Yes.
These are something extraordinary, and I'd like to have two things happen today, if nothing else happens. One, for you to tell us why these bricks are significant, where you got them, how you got them, and what organization do you belong to that would cause you to, or permit you, I should say, to get these kinds of bricks. That would be the first thing. The second thing is that the people who called after your last show were terribly interested, or very much interested, in the fact that you had made a statement, and I remember the statement well, that before the extrusion process in bricks, that they were done a different way, and now that the EPA wouldn't permit you to do them that way, and it's almost impossible to match the bricks and so forth and so on, they wanted to know how the early bricks were made in Wadsworth. Now, they understand how bricks were made in, the adobe bricks and things like that, but how they were made in Wadsworth, and then what caused the change, how did the change take place, all of those kinds of things. Could you start with telling us about these bricks, please, Pat?
Well, these are representative of an assortment of various kinds of collector items and traditional brick. But for a moment, to return to Joan, there were a number of years I think she thought this was my first love.
And she found out
I'm
differently.
winning her back now after a
You're
period
winning
of
her
time.
back.
I'm having to subside a little on this issue, but she understands. Over on the far side here, that is a brick that I brought back from San Juan, Puerto Rico. It's a paver brick out of the streets around the convent restaurant in downtown San Juan. Made in Spain probably 200 years ago.
Wow.
Now, there's a good deal of compression that's taking place on that unit so that it's so dense and almost chemically resistant and non-porous, so that...
Extremely heavy.
Oh, it's very heavy.
Gee.
Yeah, I had quite a time getting that home and through customs. They wanted to know what I had inside it. In front of it is a more modern brick, a cord unit made such as Wadsworth would produce now. Next to it here is a brick from the Ohio Match Company, part of the remnants of a building that was torn down.
Oh, really? That's the Ohio Match. Who put the ribbon on it?
The owner down there now.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Richard Rudlinger gave me that.
Dick Rudlinger did
He knew that I was collecting brick. Out in front, the little piece there,
This one?
over there, right down there.
Beautiful
No.
piece right here.
Well, right in front of that.
Oh,
this
I'm
little
sorry, I
piece
didn't see
here
that. Mhm.
was brought back from the Mediterranean. Daughter Peggy secured that from a beachfront.
Big from Crete,
Yes,
washed by the Aegean Sea. Wow.
right.
Well, was that this size at one time?
Likely.
Could be, but the Aegean
More likely in a form such as this.
More like
this
that.
was a brick made by early times in this country. And the little panel.
That brick was that size at one
Yeah.
time. The Aegean Sea took care of it.
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, water does a lot of things.
Yes, it really does.
Coming across then in front here, we have a unit that has a very special symbolic meaning for me. It's a train leaving the station and made by a brick company in Reading, Pennsylvania. That unit is great around Christmas
That's
time.
special.
That company makes one type around Christmas time, and that's kind of a Christmas gift to those who are brick collectors.
And that's special because your one son was heavily impassioned by trains, right?
Lost his life on a
Lost
train.
his life as a result.
1970.
Oh, just horrible.
And we gave each of those to our kids as a symbolism. This brick here was made in Bartlesville, Oklahoma by the Indian tribe out there at that time, and it's got great symbols and drawings on it that represent a fashion of sorts to them in some language.
Now that looks a good deal like some of the bricks we've made, not near this even, but how would they have made those bricks, Pat?
That likely was a stove kill.
Stove kill?
Yeah. Formed, piled up in a room about the size of the studio, 20 by 20, and fired, covered by some sort of igneous material, probably wood or coal, and fired until it was almost impenetrable. You know. That had a good deal more fire than necessary. As you can see, it started to turn and to become vitreous. This is a brick from Mexico. Now that's probably...
That's actually a brick, it's not a piece of stone?
No, that's a brick.
That's a brick.
That's an adobe brick from down in Mexico. I brought that back from around Mexico City.
Now what's that made of?
Well, it's probably the crudest form of a brick manufacturing effort. That was made in kind of a bread pan and tamped down and turned over and sun-dried, maybe a little firing. But because of the difference in the temperature in Mexico City and the difference in temperature here, that doesn't have to have a lot of firing. It will hold its form and shape down there. Rain eventually will begin to erode it, or some freezing and thawing perhaps. But they built it wide, so they had the wall thickness that much in width, and painted or coated, whatever they need to do. This brick here, made in Alliance, Ohio, was used on the Indianapolis Speedway.
This one right here?
Yes.
Indianapolis Speedway. Oh, crime, that's heavy.
Well, it has to have a solid base. As you'll see on the bottom here, it's got some knobs that keep it in place, whether in concrete or it's not movable sideways or lengthwise.
That's a heavy one.
Or if that's used in the wall, then they use a retainer.
Retainer, so that...
This brick here I had made for Bill Batchelder. That has his name on it.
Bill Batchelder is the representative from Medina County to the Ohio legislature, and he has been there for 30 years. Is that correct?
He was. He's been down there a lot. He went from service right into the House. This brick here is quite phenomenal. It's glazed on all sides, made as a traditional brick cord unit and fired up to about 2100 degrees. And then glazing was applied. Red is the most difficult color to handle as far as securing eventual completeness of bond on the surface of that material. It can be made in reds and greens and whites and blacks and blues.
What would they use that for?
A decoration.
Just
Well, some buildings used it. I know that General Motors Tech Center in Detroit built a whole building out of this.
Out of that? Why would they have it for both sides so that...
Well, sometimes it's used on walls,
Oh, I see.
single
Okay.
walls, and they need it on both sides.
That's right, that's right.
On the other hand, it's just as easy to do it on both sides. Then they have alternatives. If this side isn't
You could take the other one.
use the other side. And here's an unusual little thing. This is a calling card.
A little heavy.
A little brick, but that was a calling card for that company.
This is the nightwear, K-N-I-G-H-T wear. That would be, wouldn't want to carry too many of those around your billfold.
You have to have a helper.
You surely would.
This brick right here we made quite a number of years ago for the Ford Motor Company, and that's a parapet wall top.
Parapet wall. Tell
or
us
a
about
garden wall.
parapet walls because they no longer exist, do they?
It takes a good deal of effort, although they do exist.
Do they?
Some of those have been built a long time are permanent, better than some of the parapets efforts we have now.
Parapet wall is that wall which extends above the roof.
Right.
And the word parapetum, pectum, is the Latin for protecting one's chest. So they would stand on the roof, and they would protect their chests, people, against the bow and arrows and so forth. That's why they call it
Sure.
parapet.
This case, I think, adapted to be more decorative than anything else.
Right. Oh, I'm sure.
and,
They have to be a short man to have a chest.
Additionally,
that high.
we made a lot of brick for the Ford Motor Company around the Dearborn Inn and the Greenfield Village and Oakman Boulevard area. Those walls and that research center in 1953 was a rush job for us. We made 700,000 brick and 70,000 shapes of this type back in the winter of 1953.
When you couldn't even extract the clay from the ground, but you did it.
I have something here for you today. I'm going to give this to you.
Oh, for me?
And this is a commemorative brick made in 1976 on the 200th anniversary.
Of the birth of our nation.
Right.
1776, 90. Where did you make, were these from
No, not
General
from
Plant?
Wadsworth. These are from a plant in Pennsylvania.
And I get to have this?
That is yours.
Hey, thank you very much. I'll take that one.
You have to keep it on the desk. You
I
can't
will
throw it
keep
at
that on the
anybody.
desk. We will keep that on the desk. What about that other brick you have there?
This one?
Yeah.
This is kind of a gimmick.
I guess it is.
It's made out of rubber, and we used to have a lot of fun with those. We'd walk into an architect's office and
Throw it at him.
sling it, and he would just about have a hernia trying to catch it. But it's a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun in business.
Tell us why, or how they made those bricks back in, well, when did they start in the General Clay, which was then Wadsworth Brick and Tile, then the Brickyard. When they first started, how did they make the bricks? And tell us how that first operation was. That's what people would like to
Well,
hear.
in 1904, of course, the plant was started, and preceded my time, of course. And this was how the plant looked at about 1950. You see the periodic kills here, the storage area there in the office, and then the acquiring company from Columbus was able to go ahead and refurbish a lot of these periodic kills, which you see over here.
Why do we call them periodic kills?
Because it's cyclical in nature that you place the brick in the kiln, fire them for a couple of weeks, and then on curing or bonding or firing achievement, you go in and redeem the brick. Take them out, sort them, blend them, package them, ready for delivery. This is a picture of about 1956 showing the then Plant 5 and the new Plant 4. And that was the advent of then more modern techniques, the tunnel kill and so on, as opposed to the periodic kill.
Okay. And the tunnel kill, and we can explain that in a few minutes, but this is the historic part right
Yes,
here. This was the Brickyard as we remember it in our
Exactly.
boyhood days. And I remember going down there and seeing those. And
Yep.
it was almost like a scene out of Siberia or something.
In the wintertime, it was
Yes,
Siberia.
it was Siberia.
It was always colder around here. This was probably representative of the plant from about 1930 on. Prior to that time, there were two plants there. The original plant, 1904, until 1928. And then with hard times in the 30s, they discontinued one plant. It went into disuse and was dismantled when we created Plant 4 in 1956. And the process then, in those days, was a good deal primitive as compared to how we do it today. This picture here is of the new tunnel kill on the inside of the factory, and just about to get underway in those days.
And those bricks go through in how many days?
About 10 days.
10
They're
days.
from forming to shipping. And this is some of the crew in 1954 when the plant celebrated its 50th anniversary.
Can you name any of those people, Pat?
Sure. Abe Mass is on my right from the picture, and John Everhart's on my left. I think Joe Wanko is there, right on the
Could you
corner.
point to them so that
This is Joe Wanko over here. Oh, no, that's Clarence Zettel. I'm sorry.
Clarence
Zettel.
Zettel.
Zettel. And this is our mailman today. I can't think of his name. Downtown. Cheney.
Oh, Cheney.
Cheney. And others that names skip me at the moment. Abe Mast, myself, John Everhart.
John Everhart's wife just died not too long ago.
Yes. And method of moving the brick was, of course, by high lift and packaging in 500 unit cubes. And this represents the storage of such a unit. We were able to always have 3 or 4 million brick in stock, ready for...
3 or 4 million. Wow.
Had to. For the various 50 different kinds we made, we had to have inventory. In those days, we had the good fortune of having Jim Rhodes come to town, dedicate our plant in 1966. And
How did you get him there? I think that's an interesting story.
well, it is interesting. We were friends with Fred Neuenswander.
Right. Fred Neuenswander was a man who came through town on his way from here, from wherever he was going to wherever he came from to wherever he was going, and he stopped in Wadsworth, and he said, "This place needs a Chamber of Commerce." Is that right?
Exactly. Yes.
And he became the person who was in charge of the Chamber of Commerce. But then he went and lived in Norton, didn't he? He didn't live in
he
Wadsworth.
lived in Norton.
He lived in Wadsworth.
Near Brookside Country Club.
But Fred Neuenswander was, and he and his wife also, his wife was also a very powerful woman, but Fred was a very powerful mover and shaker. And tell us how he got Jim Rhodes up here.
Well, Fred moved from Wadsworth to Worcester and became their director of Chamber of Commerce. And one time, about that time, when Jim Rhodes was on his campaign for jobs, and profit is not a dirty word, he was with Fred, who concurred in those sentiments, and was able to appoint Fred Neuenswander his economic director.
Right, I was just going to say that,
Department of the State of Ohio.
Fred then became very close to Jim Rhodes.
Yes.
And then
For
you
years
knew
did.
Fred Neuenswander very well because you were on the Chamber of Commerce here in Wadsworth. So you got Fred to have to get Rhodes to come up here, then Governor Rhodes to come up here. Governor Rhodes was a specific type of person, very warm, gentle, but a big gruff man, wasn't he?
I don't know about the gruffness. I know that he
direct, maybe direct
yes.
rather than gruff, right? I think that's a good, better term.
I was with him on 2 occasions when he dedicated this plant in April of 1966.
And who were those people there?
It's George Hightower and Governor Rhodes and myself.
And who's George Hightower?
George Hightower was a lead person in our formation department in the area of compounding. And when Governor Rhodes came in that day, while he was an hour and a half late, we had assembled various dignitaries from around town. Here's Woody Powers and Harold Fix and Tom Gertner visiting dignitaries from their various functions around town.
Tom Gertner was at that time
City
owner
Councilman,
of the
I think.
A city councilman, but he also owned the Ohio station, did he not? And Harold Fix was the superintendent of schools. And who was the other person?
Woody Powers was
Woody Powers,
owner of DHL.
Woody Powers owns DH&L.
Along with Robert. And we had probably a couple hundred people there over the succeeding couple of hours. And when Governor Rhodes arrived, he spotted that we had tomato juice and some goodies, and picked up a tray of tomato juice and waltzed around through the various employees, passing it out himself. He became the waiter.
That's the kind of person he was. Very warm and gentle.
Yeah.
Very warm and gentle.
Making friends. And
I came across Governor Rhodes several times. When I was at the university, he came over one day for a meeting, and at the end of the meeting said, "Now, do you people have any questions or anything that you need?" And our president at that time, Dr. D.J. Gazzetta, said, "We need a new gym." So how much do you need? So we need $4 million. Says, "Get me a piece of paper." We got $4 million. Who was that you just held up?
well, this was Governor Rhodes talking to our group, and in the corner here is Mrs. Harold Epler Jr., and of course myself. This was a nice color photograph of the plant back in those days. This was a periodic kill reverting back to the original production type. And Howard Doster, do you remember Howard?
Oh, yes, right.
He was president of the Chamber of Commerce at that time and led a nice response to Governor Rhodes' invitation and performance of cutting the ribbon.
What happened to Howard Doster then? Where did he go?
Howard moved to New Jersey. He was the vice president of the foundry.
But he came here
And,
just for a very short period of time for the chamber, was he not?
No, he was on staff at the injector and also on the hospital board in those days.
No, but he was not with the chamber.
Oh, no, no.
No, that's what I say.
He was president of the chamber.
Yeah, president of the chamber, but he was not he didn't take Fred Neuenswander's place.
No.
Okay.
And here's Earl Gottwald, who was mayor at the time, responding to Governor Rhodes and our invitation to
And
cut the
we've
ribbon.
asked Earl to be interviewed, but unfortunately his health isn't such that he can be interviewed, but he would have some wonderful stories to tell.
On that occasion, we did have some other dignitaries. Here was Harold Jones from the Cleveland Plain Dealer.
Point to Harold Jones.
Right in the center.
Right in the center. And who's
then
on his left?
Over here is Harold Epler, the owner of the brick plant.
of the General Plain
Products.
Tile. Right.
Yes. And this is a crew of that day walking down through the plant, seeing the various activities going on there in the firing operation. You're about in the middle between the tunnel kills we had round the clock.
The roads.
And again, a stocking situation for
And
that
3
material.
million, you stocked 3 million of those bricks.
Oh, probably had 3 million at each plant.
Wow.
5, 6 million. One job of interest locally that we did, we're quite proud of, it was the Barefoot Sole Company.
Mm-hmm.
And that took a special brick that we made from a manganese ingredient to make it a chocolate flavored color.
And that won an award, I believe.
Yes, it did.
It won an award. Tell us about that award and how you people figured in that.
Well, Kenny Durr designed it. Of course, he was right, and he's still very proud about that job.
Right. Kenny Durr was an architect here in Wadsworth. His wife was Glenna Durr, who was a counselor at the high school. Tremendous woman, and Kenny was a great person too.
Yes.
But tell us about that award that he won, or you people won.
Well, we submitted it to the Brick Institute of America, and because of the unique use of brick and other combining materials, it won first place.
Won first place. And that was national, wasn't it?
Yes.
First place nationally. The Barefoot Sole, which is now, what is it, Eggleston and...
Goldsmith and Eggleston.
Goldsmith and Eggleston. On, at the end of...
Water Street.
Of Water Street and First Street there, where they would come together.
Right.
And do you remember anything at all about getting that contract? It wasn't an easy thing to do, was it?
Well,
at that time,
I think we had developed a great friendship, with I.B. Calvin and Tim Calvin and Harvey Werner.
And those are the ones who were the principals in the Barefoot Sole.
They wanted a submission of various samples that we had, and they chose it, and the architect concurred.
But before that, the firm that was there, the company that was there, was pretty well owned by people outside of Wadsworth, right? The Chemitex.
I don't know much about
I thought that they were owned some like the Cyberling or something like that. But the Calvins came to town, and they became very, very much interested in becoming part of Wadsworth. And from the stories that have been told to me, and incidentally, I have heard more history from the telephone calls that we receive from people after we have these programs then we, of course this is tremendously accurate, but people say, well, I remember this little bit about that. And one of the things that did come up in one of the phone calls about the brickyard, the General Clay and Tile, was that they were extremely energetic in trying to get places such as the Barefoot Soul, Kent State University, the Ford Place, and so forth. Now, they attributed this to the vice president and sales manager. Who would be the vice president and sales manager at that time?
I guess I was.
Pat Brannigan,
Yes.
Right. So you actually...
However, I wasn't the sole force in that direction.
No, of course not. None of us is ever the sole force, but you were the leader in this one. And did the Calvins want that brick, or did someone somewhat convince them that this would be a good use of brick and materials?
Well, I think that it was kind of mutual. They looked at a lot of samples from our office, and they had somewhat an idea, as presented originally by the architect, a schematic, and so we happened to have something that fit their need. I suppose that...
But didn't someone have to make it?
Oh, we did.
Yeah,
yes.
and was it something that was on one of the $3 million on the pile?
Not necessarily.
No, this was something that...
Well, we were looking, we continued to develop new products every year, and this was one we found we could use without violating EPA control. So introducing manganese directly in the raw material and then firing it such was different from introducing it later to acquire a color. We're
going to get back to that in a minute because we want to get through all these other kinds of things, but it'd be very interesting to know how you, Pat Brannigan, figured into the colors of bricks for various things. There's an aestheticism there that you aren't going to give yourself credit for, but other people do. For instance, tell us about, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail, but tell us about how you selected the bricks for the new addition to Sacred Heart School and why.
Well, that selection, of course, was an architectural finale. The decision was evident that we could not necessarily match the school job nearby where the gymnasium building was going to be built.
And why not?
Well, that brick was made in 1950 and 52 under coal firing operations on the old regime as far as performance, and EPA just wouldn't allow us to do some of those things. So
what did you have in those bricks that caused the problem with EPA?
Well, originally manganese was the first issue, and that would have been a black that we applied metallic-like in the firing operation. However, no black in this particular portion. But the mere effluent going up the stack created great worry about them.
In other words, there's nothing wrong with the bricks. You could touch the bricks or even eat them if you could, but that doesn't bother. But it's the effluent going up the stacks that caused the problem.
We were forced to consider the alternative of putting in about $75,000 worth of corrective equipment on every kill, had 16 of them, versus throwing everything away we knew we could do and coming up with a new process called a tunnel kill, round-the-clock process, limit the transgressions, if any, that we would have on the eventual new process. So that was the way we did, and then in that, of course, we lost a lot of opportunities, and so we developed such things as applications that were non-transitional that way.
Well, how did you figure in the color that they finally decided upon?
Well, if you look at the school building, it's a moderate buff and a moderate pink, and we chose to go down the middle. The building in the gymnasium brick is a tone between the extremes on the buff and the pink, and frankly, I like it better.
Oh, it's very nice. There's no question
It's
about
large enough to make an impact. Now, additionally, that gymnasium was built with oversized brick. Those units are 3 3/4 by 3 3/4 by 11.5/8.
Which means that they're bigger than the normal brick, which is about 8 inches?
Yes.
So they're an additional about a third larger?
Lou Perry was the architect and concurred with our suggestion that that building could stand a larger size unit, as big as it is. Not necessarily with smaller buildings, but true of that case.
And were you on that committee to help select?
Yes.
And what about some of these other places like the Ford Motor Company and the Kent State University and all those other places where they...
Going back to Ford Motor Company in 1953, February something, I got a call from them, their engineering department, asking I come to Detroit right away. They wanted to create a new building, a new research center next to the Dearborn Inn by June of '53. That would have been 4 or 5 months. And since they indicated they knew we were supposed to have a big barrel of their plans from all the prior jobs we've done, they asked we get those out, look at them, see what it might take to get new brick in time so that that project could go ahead. And so I went to Detroit the following day, met with their engineering staff, and came home with plenty of promise for an order. And of course, it was February. We weren't running at the time. We had to call staff in and go to work, creating 700,000 brick and 70,000 shapes. And we did. Ford Motor Company sent staff down here to monitor us day by day until that project was complete. Started out to ship by rail, and that was slow because they were having trouble getting through Toledo. So all of a sudden...
Why were they having trouble getting through Toledo?
Well, those days they had to go through what they call a hump, and they were not doing that very well at that time. So in the succeeding few days, when we were ready to start shipping, all of a sudden 6 brand new Ford truck trailers showed up, and they were shipping around the clock as we got them ready. That project was completed just under the wire, and it is still beautiful today. Additionally, we had to make a good many thousands of shapes for all the surrounding garden walls that were come away from Dearborn Inn in that direction. And the celebration went on as planned.
Just out of curiosity, how much did that cost Ford?
Oh boy.
In the hundreds of thousands or millions or what?
Oh, no.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
Yes.
Isn't it strange that something that can last for such a long time is probably one of the least expensive parts of the edifice?
I like to think today that a brick weighing 4.5 pounds costs about 30 cents. And you'll go to the store and buy a loaf of bread that weighs 1.25 pounds for $1.39. And there's
that bread will last forever. Of course, that bread does too. Once it gets to me, it lasts for a long time. It never leaves me. It's unfortunate.
I'm considering the relevance of cost. We put in with 100 people to create this, and lots of hard work and lots of engineering effort and science and skills to make sure that that unit comes out size-wise, color-wise, and so on, consistent with what we sample.
Right. So we don't get stalled again because these are so interesting. How about continuing with what you have there, because you have it all very well planned out, as I'm sure you would have. This next picture is one I think that really bears some
one of the these are 2 jobs of which we were especially proud. The top one is the Eastland Shopping Center in Detroit. And that took nearly 1 million brick, 1 million Norman size, which is 11.
Norman size is the longer brick, right?
And then the lower unit here was the Assumption College in Windsor, Ontario.
Oh, you ship internationally too?
We had probably 12 or 15 buildings on that campus and continue today.
Wow. What's the farthest you've ever shipped brick from the little General Clay and Tile here in Wadsworth?
I expect it's probably 2 items there, Caesar. We ship brick for a B&W company to Brazil, to Egypt for some of their furnace work and some of their office buildings. That took a lot of skill for the international effort. We weren't that adept in getting brick out of the country, but B&W was, so we would consign them to their ports of departure, and they would take care of it there. One of the bigger jobs that probably was most distant was a college above Halifax, Nova Scotia.
What was the name of the college?
Essex College.
Essex College in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
About 100 miles north of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And that was, of course, seasonal up there. They had to have material in on time so they could get it into the wall in a timely fashion to be ready for winter time. Done with a North Carolina architect and a New York contractor and a little brick plant from Ohio.
A little brick plant from Wadsworth, Ohio.
Right.
Before you go into that next picture, I'd like very much to ask this question. When you first came in 1948 to the Wadsworth area, You then went directly from there to, you came directly to the brickyard at that time, is that correct?
Yes.
1948. Giving due credit to all of the wonderful people who worked there, and they were great people. I knew most of them because they were friends of mine and neighbors of mine and so forth. Walter McClure, whom you know, is a neighbor of mine. They're just great, great people. Of course, they're all dead now, all of them. My heavens, he'll be over 100 years old. What is the sophistication level of the person who has to work there now vis-a-vis the sophistication level of the person who's there in 1948?
Well, we found it necessary in earlier years in the 60s and 70s, first of all, to convert from coal to gas.
Okay.
It was much easier to handle, much easier to control, and much easier to apply. It did raise our costs. And we were probably East Ohio Gas largest customer in the area. We had several 4-inch lines going in there at full power, serving 2 plants. Secondly, we found that the nature of some of our work was a little demeaning, a little dehumanizing.
Dehumanizing.
Handling 2 brick by brick by brick, day by day, and hour by hour. And you developed lots of ailments and physical conditions that weren't contributory to good health. So we were able in the 60s and 70s to adapt computer control and modernization and robotics so that when the brick came away from the die, under controlled fashion, they were gathered in amounts of 396 at a time and put on a kill car, not to be handled again until they were taken off automatically and packaged.
Wow. So then this level of sophistication came from strong brawn, muscles and backs, and probably not too terribly much ingenuity, to probably now where you have to have computer experts, and I suspect that you have computers all over, you're no longer there, but I suspect that General Clay and Tile has computers all over the place, does it not?
Yes, from headquarters on down, and of course we thought it would be wise to apply some of the techniques of utilization of that effort into the manufacturing level so that we could create the opportunity to have them universally otherwise.
Right.
And we found also that many of our customers were computerized. They could send us fax and control and blueprints and things of that nature.
With the computerization. So what at one time was the sweatshop of Wadsworth, and people went there because they needed to make money, and they probably couldn't do a whole lot of other things, although they could have worked elsewhere, but they elected to work there. We now have a highly sophisticated clientele, labor force. Do you have any, quote, laborers left?
I'd like to think not. I think that all of it's been elevated to a newer, higher plane. There's still some hard work to do, whether it be by shovel or cleanup or things of that nature.
Well, there's always that. Even your own home. I don't care how computerized, you still have to wash your own. You have to wash the toilet bowl. Unless they kind of have a computer somewhere to do that. So there's always a little bit of that. But I noticed that they lift them now with forklifts.
Oh, yes.
But at one time they were doing that by hand, were they not?
Wheelbarrow. And
wheelbarrow.
tong.
And
wheelbarrow
tong,
and tong.
right.
6 brick at a time on a tong, and of course, whatever a wheelbarrow would be, about 100 brick.
100 bricks. Now they do 396 at a time?
Well, that's on the beginning end.
At the beginning
That's in the manufacturing level. Those brick come out and stage themselves on a platform, are sliced and gathered so that 396 are picked up by grips, pneumatically controlled, and put on the kill car. Done better than ever by hand.
One of the cleverest things I ever saw in Wadsworth was the Brickyard Road. There is no way that anyone could have gone down the Brickyard Road except very, very, very slowly because it's so bad. Was that done on purpose, just out of curiosity?
Well, it had a history. Back when we were coal firing, that was a good place to put all the ashes.
Right.
Ashes have no gathering strength for solidity. And how deep that is, we've never determined. But about 20 years ago, we came in with a company from Worcester and put in a new roadway, topped it all. But that underlayment just wouldn't support it.
No.
And so it was kind of a fruitless thing to continue to apply money when we realized that it was going to have a short life. It also impeded the speed
It surely did.
We didn't
need
want
to
them
speak.
sailing down into the plant and being unable to
It
step.
probably helped a lot of the spring shops in Wadsworth with the cars. I'm not going to take any more time from my questioning, but I'd like to have you pick up whatever you can here, because we have only about 4 minutes left, 5 maybe, at the very tops, and I'd like to have you tell us what we need to know about you. And I see that Max and Irma's, and that's been out of the corner of my eye for a long time, and I'd like to have you talk about that if you could.
Well, this is a company, our daughter is a vice president. And today she is in Atlanta, opening a new store in Greenville, South Carolina.
Max and Irma's, if this chain isn't extant in the year 2014, we need to say what Max and Irma's is.
It's a restaurant chain.
Restaurant chain.
With about 50-some restaurants in the system.
And they aren't fast food.
No.
They're kind of
fresh food.
Fresh fruit, and they're kind of an upscale kind of a thing for younger people,
Yes.
the younger set. Your daughter Carol is Bonnie is the vice president of that. And what does she do, and where is she, and so forth?
Well, she's vice president of marketing for that company, and here she is pictured here with the officers of that company.
She's pictured there with the officers. Isn't it nice that you married a good-looking wife so that you have good-looking kids?
Don't think so. Let's see. Let's go to Steve for a minute. I think I have some pictures here that might be of interest to your...
I think we do need to hear more about those pictures from Steve, because we'll never get to see this again firsthand.
This is Steve's launch on the Discovery, and before it left, of course. And
you know, it's hard to tell just how big that thing is. Point to something down here and tell us what it is. Is that a car down there, or is that a way down at the bottom?
well, here's a truck.
There's a truck.
There's a truck.
And it's a big truck too, isn't it?
Of course, these tanks, these are IRBs, rocket boosters, and then the fuel cell. And these all depart, there's 4.5 million pounds on departure of weight.
4.5 million pounds.
So when they build up the thrust down here and kick off those retention bolts, it's going to go somewhere. There's just an amazing amount of force.
And you have seen this lift off,
I witnessed it twice. It leaves and has to get up to a thrust of propulsion of 17,000 miles an hour in order to escape the Earth's gravity. Once it does that, after 8.5 minutes of thrust like this, it's into outer space.
And then they don't have to have any more propulsion?
There are 50 little thruster units along the sides of this unit, and they can maneuver it up or down or side. And of course, when they're ready to return, they turn those down to slow the propulsion, and they fall into space, or fall into Earth atmosphere.
Gravity.
This is how that launch looks
On the way up.
as it goes away. There's just an enormous noise, force, rumble.
What is this little thing? It looks like an airplane on the side.
That is the shuttle.
That is the shuttle.
Yeah. And it's hanging, it's all concurrently gripped with the rocket boosters.
And they are in that, right?
They're up at the nose of it, right there.
They're standing up, or are they sitting down? Or?
Sitting down on their back, looking up.
Oh, my heavens.
And this is a picture of the shuttle in space with the doors open. That was taken from the Russian shuttle.
That was actually a photograph taken from another shuttle.
Right. And here's the return of Steve's flight 10 or 11 days later.
It seems so incongruous to have a parachute to have to stop that when we have all of the other kinds of equipment, which is electronic and hydraulic and so forth, but they put a parachute out there to help stop it.
Well, it rumbles in. Of course, there's no force on it. It's dead weight, and no need to continue it all the way out. And it's on there for safety reasons so that it doesn't get into an extended run and have to be captured in the sand somewhere.
And this is the one that they were in all of the time.
Yes.
And then it comes back to Earth, and that's what it looks like.
Open up the top bay, and they can crawl out of here. It's about 50 feet long.
Have you ever seen them come out of there? I mean, have you been on there for landing as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I was there at the last one. And this is a little feature here that Steve sent to me following his last flight, February. This flag did go on the shuttle, as did this patch. And of course, this is the launch. This is the return. These are the Hubble units. There's a picture of the horizon of the world and the crew. And a little documentary saying that all of these items are relevant to his flight.
Pat Brannigan makes bricks that go all over the world and marries into a family that goes out of the world. Thank you, Pat, for everything that you've given us. We are so pleased to have had you. Our time is up again.
Too short. Still more to go. Thank you very much, Cesar. Enjoyed it.